Hello everyone and welcome back to Classic Dune. And today I wanted to make a video on some interesting methods that I have created on how to choose the factions that are going to be in your game of Dune. So earlier, a couple of weeks ago, I posted a video on how to include the expansion factions and still have a balanced game. Simple things like, don't have four economy factions or don't have zero economy factions, or try not to have too many complicated bidding phase factions like the Atreides, Ixians, and Rishes. But today I wanted to make one for people who want to just say, devil take the rules and open themselves up to situations where they do have these weird faction combinations. But a way to do it that's more fun and interesting than just getting a random six and playing like that. So the first one that we're going to be covering here, and I've given these all names with varying degrees of cleverness. The first one is the Intrigue method, and this one you can actually find in the back of the Expansion 3 rulebook. Basically, now that there's 3 expansions and 12 potential factions to choose from, there's a lot of interesting faction selection methods that you have at your disposal, and this is one that is officially endorsed. So Intrigue is essentially, you're going to get all 12 factions, and each player is going to get dealt 2 of them. Oops, did not mean to do that. So each player is going to get 2 factions to choose from, and then they pick the one they want to use, and that's it. So in this scenario, I might have a choice between Rishes and Moritani. Simple as, pick the one you want, and then the other is not in play. This is a great go-to method just because it's simple and it provides little choice for the player. Now that might sound like a bad thing, but if you want to just have a quick way to get into a game, just having 2 factions to choose from makes it a lot easier to just make a choice and see what happens. And I've also ordered all of these methods in order of how well you should probably know all the 12 factions. So we're starting with the easier methods where, hey, you don't know them all, then you should probably be fine. But if you're going to use these later ones, I would suggest that you've played every faction at least once. And I guess this video is brought to us by House Rishes now. So the next one is called the Confluence method. And this one is very similar to Intrigue. This one is thought up by Banana Smasher. And I really like this one because it's the same as the Intrigue method, but you're going to get 1 expansion faction and 1 base game faction. So in this game, we've got Ikaz and Bene Gesserit. This player might have Rishes and Atreides. This one would get Tleilaxu and Guild. So this one's nice if you just want to see a little bit of variety in terms of your balance between expansion and classic factions. It's interesting, give everyone a bit of choice. Someone likes every base game faction, but maybe doesn't like every expansion faction. Well, they'll definitely have one to choose from, and same vice versa. And then, once again, you've only got 2 options to choose from, so this is going to be a faster method. The hardest part is just going to be separating out those 12 factions. And now let's move on to the privileged method. So what you're going to do with this one is, optionally, you can go and take the factions +1 for each player you have in the game. So if you're playing a full 6-player game, then you can take 6 +1. So that's 7 factions, and you stick them in a bag. And then you get 1 person, you determine a random order, and starting with 1 person, they look at all these 7 factions here, and they choose the one they want. So you might see Guild, Chom, Fremen, Rishes, Harkonnen, Tleilaxu, and Ixians, and you say, oh, I'd like to play the Fremen, and then they've got theirs. Then you go to the next person in order, you see what you have to choose, and they pick it. And then so on and so forth until the last person is going to have only 2 choices, and then that's their choice to make. This one's a little bit more unfair, but it's pretty interesting at the same time. first person's going to have a lot of choice, the second person a little bit less, all the way down to the last person who has the minimum amount of choice. And it's a more interesting way to do it than just giving a random order and everyone picks the faction they want to use. This one involves a little bit of a restricted set of factions to choose from. And interestingly enough, this method actually can be kind of used to augment other methods. So any method here that involves narrowing it down to 6 factions to choose from, you can just add one more random faction and then you use the privileged selection method. So you can kind of augment these and have all sorts of different combinations of various methods. The next one is going to be what I'm calling the mind killer method. So in this one, what you're going to do is you're going to get all 12 factions. You're going to determine a random order of players. And in order, each player is going to ban a faction. So in order, everyone's going to ban something, one faction that they do not want to see in the game under any circumstances. And then once you've got your leftovers, you will randomly assign these. And again, this could be a potential circumstance where you could choose one of these banned factions, add it back in, and then do the privileged selection method. Up next is going to be the golden path. This one is very similar. It's just an augment of the previous one. And this one is the opposite of the mind killer. So you're going to, you're going to get all 12 factions out. You're going to determine a random order, and everyone is going to pick a faction that they want to see in the game. You're going to go one by one. Everyone gets one choice until you have 6 factions to choose from. And then you're going to randomly assign these, or alternatively, you could use the privileged selection method. Just add one of these in and then go to town. Now, these two, since they're similar, good to cover them at the same time. These ones are going to be more involved because the players have all the factions, all 12 of them potentially, to choose from to make a choice on. Whether they want to ban it or whether they want to add it to the game. And then if you do the privileged selection method, people are going to, again, have a lot of factions to choose from on what they want to do. So this one's probably going to take a little bit longer unless you have players who know what they want right away and just do it. And again, you probably want to know what each faction does at the very least. Preferably, though, everyone has played each of those factions at least once. All right, next up on our list is the worm sign method. Now, the worm sign method is each player is going to, in a random order, they're going to grab a faction, and they're going to choose to either include it in the game or exclude it. And then you're going to go around repeating if necessary until you've got a set of 6 factions that are in the game or 6 factions that are excluded. And then, obviously, process of elimination tells you who to choose from. So let's say we got Ekaz. I like Ekaz, so they'll be in. And then Emperor. I do like Emperor, so they'll be in too. And then maybe we'll exclude Moritani, and then maybe someone will exclude Guild. And then they'll include Atreides. And then maybe they hate those face dancers, so they exclude Tleilaxu. Put the Ixians in there, why not? Include the Harkonnen. Exclude the Rishes. And then this person chooses that they love the Bene Gesserit, so they include them as well. And now you've got 6 factions that are in the game, so then these are the ones that you will disperse among the players, either randomly, or you do a privileged selection, or what have you. Alternatively, if it went the other way around and you had 6 factions getting banned first, well, now you just pull the 2 remaining ones, and those are your factions that are in play. And again, disperse them as you please. Now, next up on our faction selection methods is going to be the olive branch. Now, these last 2, this one included, are ones where you should definitely have a group of experienced players before you choose to use these methods, since it's going to rely on knowing what you like about the faction. You've played them a couple times. You say, you know what, I like this faction, or I don't like this faction. Or if you're feeling crazy and you just want to like play a faction you've never heard of potentially, then maybe this method is for you. So the olive branch method, what is this? Well, in a random order, you're going to have one player start and they're going to draw a faction. You have a starting player and they are going to pick a faction. So let's say the Emperor. And then they are going to offer this faction to another player at the table. If that player accepts to play as, for example, here the Emperor, then they take it. If they don't accept, however, you are now the Emperor. So a little bit of, if you want them to play that faction, you give them something they like. But if there's a faction you want to play, then you try to offer it to someone who hopefully doesn't like that faction. Interesting little bit of mind gaming here. This works well if you're at a table of people you play with all the time and you can kind of read them. Now, how it goes from here is if the faction gets rejected and you are now that faction, the player you offered to goes next, and then they pick a faction and offer it to someone else. If your offering is accepted, however, you are going to pick again. So you'll draw a faction, and then you'll choose a player to give it to. And then you'll proceed, so on and so forth, until everyone has a faction. Now, the one downside to this is, in addition to hopefully having a very experienced table, is some players will probably never get the chance to pick a faction and offer it to someone. So that's a downside. But if you don't mind that, it's not a huge part of the game, it's just the selection method, then this might be a fun thing to try out. And finally, we have the political tripod. And this one is probably going to be the craziest one you could choose. This one is in a random order. Each player is going to draw a random faction, and then they will choose who is playing that faction. So I've pulled the Chome. Somebody will be definitely playing the Chome, and I will give it to that person. And then that person that now has a faction assigned is going to draw another random faction, and they're already playing Chome. They are already playing Chome, so now they will have to choose who's going to be playing the ECAS. And then that player who's got a faction assigned will then draw another one. Lots of expansions in this game, and then they choose who's going to play it, so on and so forth, until everyone is accounted for. So this is definitely going to be the weirdest one. You are going to have a faction that someone else has chosen just for you to play as. So it might be something that you're really good at, or it might be a faction that you're not so good at, and it was a malicious choice. But either way, it's pretty crazy. You definitely want to have a group of experienced players, and ideally, again, you all know each other, so maybe you could try to poke fun at someone by giving them a faction that they don't typically do well with. Or you might even want to start kind of playing into the game and give someone a faction that they do really well with, and then hope that you could try to ally with them later on as a sort of strategic decision-making process. Now, again, the official rules do say that there are no deals during setup. So I would encourage you to not say, hey, I'll give you this faction if you give me that. I wouldn't consider that binding. But go ahead and offer it because, hey, some of the most beautiful moments in board games are when you make these non-binding deals and then they end up going through and everyone held up their end of the bargain. Of course, right up there alongside those beautiful moments is when people do make a binding deal and someone immediately betrays the other person and takes advantage of it. But who knows? About half or so of these I have actually tried out in real games, but the other half I just came up with and then gave them a clever name. So let me know if you end up trying any of these and let me know how they go. Or, again, let us know if there's any faction selection methods that you use at your table or would like to use, and share them with us, and maybe we'll use them sometime. But for now, that's going to do it for me. Got 8 here for you to choose from, but let's see, maybe in the future there will be more that come to mind or get suggested by you guys. Until next time, I'll catch y'all later.